We have George Miner. He's a senior tax manager with PKF. Sorry. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Looking at the issue of taxation, because that is one of the major issues that you're likely to see from the budgets today. Kenya plans to pass the VAT bill, which probably will rake in about R1 billion shillings. But there's some very contentious issues in there because of food, taxation on food and basic commodities. For you, what are some of the thoughts when you look at the taxation regime that we're finding in Kenya?
Actually, to talk about the VAT bill, you remember the bill itself was tabled in 2012, and there are certain contentious issues that were actually made the bill to be removed from the floor of the House. One of which is the fact that the bill intends to tax basic items of consumption such as bread, milk, and even sanitary towels, medical items. Another area that the bill will, of course, affect would be agricultural inputs. Remember, our economy is agricultural driven, and of course that will have a huge impact on the economy. I hope, even as the VAT bill is being tabled today, if that happens, certain changes may have been made to take into consideration the recommendations that were made by stakeholders last year.
But looking at the whole issue of the regime, if you compare Kenya to say Uganda, to say Tanzania and Rwanda, how is Kenya faring with regards to taxation?
In terms of taxation, the levels of tax in Kenya are a bit high overall, because if you look at VAT, although is a bit lower compared to the other countries, Tanzania is 18%, Uganda 18%, Kenya 16%. We have a multiple of other taxes, forms of taxes, which ultimately make Kenya a bit, Kenyans are more burdened from a tax perspective. However, looking at the whole region, one of the things I would expect the ministers in the three regions or four countries to do is to try to harmonize the taxes. If you look, for example, Kenya has this huge deficit from a taxation point of view, trying to raise revenue. But one of the areas which Kenya has not fared very well is taxation of wealth, capital gains tax. Uganda has capital gains tax, Tanzania has capital gains tax. So I would expect the finance secretary this afternoon to reintroduce capital gains tax, and that will help him in actually narrowing down the deficit that we have.
Would that be a challenge for new home owners and probably even the real estate, which is one of the very booming asset classes that we have in Kenya?
Of course, I would expect, even as they're considering CGT, they come up with certain thresholds. Because like in the West and many other countries, there are certain thresholds that you put. For example, the minister could say, if you bought property and you dispose it within 2 years or 3 years, then you pay capital gains tax. It means you're a speculator. But if you're selling your first home, maybe to buy a better home, you'll then be exempt from capital gains tax. So there are certain limitations or thresholds that the minister has to come up with. Remember, the real estate industry is very booming in Kenya. And actually what that means is it has a it replicates itself throughout the economy, and then it's been supporting like the financial sector and many other sectors. So the whole idea should not be to inhibit growth in that sector. It should be actually to widen it and encourage growth. But ultimately, let the people who actually create wealth and make money pay their fair share of the
taxation. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Looking at Tanzania, they're the only East African country that does not have a transfer pricing regulation. And that's one of the things that probably they're looking to introduce that is going to affect the multinationals. For you, what's your take on this?
I think that's a step in the right direction. You remember Kenya introduced the transfer pricing rules effective 1st July 2006. Uganda followed way in 2010. They introduced their transfer pricing rules actually in 2011. And Uganda has very advanced transfer pricing rules. So Tanzania has been the only country which doesn't have the TP rules. What has been happening is that most of the multinationals operating in East Africa, there's a perception that they're not reporting their fair share of taxes. So with TP rules, it will, first of all, it will harmonize the TP rules in East Africa. And secondly, it will actually bring issues of compliance from a TP perspective to another level. I will also expect the other ministers like in Uganda, Kenya, and even Rwanda to try to come up with double tax agreements for the whole region. It's very interesting that Kenya has double tax agreements with about 14 countries. Tanzania has double tax agreements with certain countries. But we do not have an existing East African double tax agreement.
Does then that make the East African region very uncompetitive?
That's one of the issues the East African community has been addressing. It doesn't make it uncompetitive as such, but it should be a step in the right direction if you're talking about international tax, because why should you pay tax in Uganda and on the same income that you pay tax in Kenya? And of course, Kenya and Uganda are the biggest trading partners. So these are some of the issues the ministers should consider, even as they look at transfer pricing.
Okay, let's now discuss Uganda, which is East Africa's third largest economy, and some of the proposals that they're trying to introduce there after the donors pulled out in terms of how much they'll fund the budget. Are some of the tax measures like levy on fuel. They're talking of registration new car. There's a levy on new cars. They're talking also of there's another one that I'm forgetting.
There's excise duty on the transfer
of money transfer. So when you look at the whole issue, and this is an issue that actually led to a lot of huge outcry in Uganda, do you think this is a step in the right direction?
Firstly, just to comment on every specific proposed measure, on the issue of 25% duty on new cars, it's just what they're trying to do, they're trying to harmonize taxes. This one has come through the East African community. The same 25% duty on new car imports will also come in Tanzania. Remember, it's only Kenya that has been imposing the 25% duty. So it's just an issue of harmonization throughout the region. Secondly, excess duty on money transfer, it will have the same impact it has in Kenya. Remember, Kenya introduced the same excess duty about 4 months ago. And what the impact is to the common mwananchi or a common citizen in those countries is that the service itself becomes expensive, and you'll find money transfer in this region of Africa. There's a preference towards using the mobile telephony money transfer services to the financial, the money markets and the banks. So it will make it expensive. However, if it is well administered, the government may get a bit of revenue. Second, also on the issue of excess duty on fuel levy, that is also an issue of harmonization throughout the region. So that,
but the issue, if you look at fuel, it's a major component for inflation, especially in the East African economies. And fuel is a key factor that you're looking at agriculture and you're looking at transportation. Then what's the implication, the ripple effect we're going to see on inflation? Already Uganda has one of the highest inflations in the region. In fact, that's for Uganda. It's a step. It's not a step in the right direction. It will have an adverse effect on the inflation. Uganda had the highest inflation rate, almost 30% early 2011. What I was expecting the Ugandan government to do is to come up with incentives now that the oil and gas industry is coming up in terms of infrastructure for oil and gas. In terms of infrastructure, and also in terms of incentives for investors to bring in the money and invest in that industry. What the fuel levy will do, it will increase the cost of fuel, and especially the oil and gas industry, fuel is a major component. So it will become expensive even more to explore for oil and gas in Uganda. Does then that not make it very uncompetitive for foreign direct investors?
Indeed it does, indeed it does. But you also have to understand that the Ugandan government is under a lot of pressure in terms of revenue generation. They've lost almost 90% of their donor dependent aid sources because of the embezzlement and the graft issues which were with the Prime Minister's office. So although the Ugandan government has indicated that they intend to generate at least 75% of their revenue from domestic sources, which are taxes. So probably, maybe the Ugandan government may go further and look for other sources, such as the usual sin taxes, excess duty on the consumption, such as alcohol and tobacco, just to try to narrow down the gap.